Okay, guys, please don't forget to turn your cameras, turn them on. And okay, so we've been working on the speaking section last week and the week before, and we've already covered 2 questions, right? Out of the, how many do we have in the speaking section?
4.
So we've covered 2 out of the 4 questions. We did task number 1, which was the independent question, and we did task number 2, right? Which was the university question. We practiced it yesterday, and we looked at the theory on Tuesday. So today we're going to be moving on to task number 3, or question number 3 of the speaking section. We're going to be doing this question here, and we're going to call that the academic question. Why? Because starting from this question, starting from question 3, everything will get academic. The ones we did before question 1 and 2 weren't really academic, right? The vocabulary you used, the topics that were being discussed, they were not really academic. But starting now, question 3 and 4 will be academic, okay? So let's take a look. What will you have to do for this question? Basically, the format is exactly the same as in task number 2. You have to do exactly the same. You will read something for 45 seconds, then you will listen to something for 1 minute approximately, and then you get 30 seconds to prepare and 60 to speak. Nothing has changed, right? You still read, you still hear something, and then you get 30 and 60 to speak. So the thing that does change is the content. So you're going to be reading something different, you're going to be listening to something different, and of course your answer should be different too. So what will you read? Basically, you will read a short passage. Okay, when I say passage, I mean academic passage. So it's a passage that you will maybe extract from a textbook, from a university textbook, on something academic, okay? So you won't be reading a letter anymore, it won't be that casual, but instead you'll be reading to an extract from a textbook. And second, you won't listen to a conversation anymore, but instead in this task, you will be listening to a lecture. Do you guys remember what a lecture was? We saw it in the listening, right? Do you remember what a lecture is? It's basically a class, right? It's a university class. So it's something that you will hear. It's a class that you will hear, right? Like you were hearing this class in a certain university. So you will hear the professor speaking about a certain academic topic, right? Now you will get 30 seconds to prepare and 60 to speak, same as in task number 2. Do you guys have any questions about this so far? The format of the question. Right? So what else? So I was telling you these are going to be academic subjects, right? Academic topics you get. And when I say academic, what subjects specifically? These are the most common ones. Luckily for us, we already know what to expect in like the majority of the TOEFL tests. This is the exception. So in this question specifically, task number 3, and I'm getting ahead and I'm telling you that it's going to be the same for task number 4. The topics that you get are always the same. 30% of the time you get a psychology topic. So it will be something about our mind, how it works, how we interact with each other, how we process memories, how we experience certain emotions, how we experience certain things, how we learn. That's psychology, very common. Sometimes you can have biology. It's another common topic. Now, you will never have human biology, but you do have biology related to animals and plants. So their organization, their lifestyle, how they relate to each other, their evolution, how they have evolved, how they have adapted to certain changes to their environment. Adaptations actually is really common here. And finally, the other one is business. all right? And it isn't really hardcore business, but instead it's just ways to attract customers. So it is very likely that you'll have something related to marketing, advertising techniques, um, things like that, okay? Now, obviously nothing's precise, so there is a small chance that you have something else. So be prepared, don't be surprised if you don't have one of these. It isn't common, but it is possible that you get something related to the arts, to geology, literature, sociology. Those are the ones that usually prevail when you don't have any of the three before. Okay. Now, why is this important? Why am I even saying this? The thing is, when you guys know the topics, you can be better prepared. One, for understanding. So you can get, because maybe, maybe biology is not your area. Maybe you hate biology, right? So you know really nothing about this. You've studied psychology perhaps. But if you know that biology is one of the most common topics here, then maybe you can care to learn some vocabulary, right? Maybe you can practice learning some words so that in case you encounter them in this task, you're not lost, right? Maybe you can try to get more familiar speaking about biology topics. So that way, when you get to speak about this, it won't be something completely new. Because believe me, I've seen that, for example, I've had students that were majoring in business or related areas. So they were doing like business administration or marketing. And when they got business topics, then they were really good at them. But they were struggling with other ones like biology or psychology. So it is important that you guys try to practice learning vocabulary and just practicing reading and listening about these topics. So for example, for psychology, what you guys can do is listen to TED Talks. That really helps. So go search some TED Talks about psychology topics. Usually most of them are about psychology. And that's going to help you expand your vocabulary in this area and also get used to the idea. For biology, I really recommend that you try and watch these National Geographic short videos that you can find in their YouTube channel. So these 4 to 5 minutes long videos, because they are actually very similar to what you have in the TOEFL test. So it's good for understanding and for vocabulary. And for business, there are plenty of podcasts that you can listen to that will help you to create more vocabulary. In case you're not, in case you don't already have vocabulary for business, right? So that would be my suggestions. Okay, that's why I'm telling you what the topics are, so you know what to expect and you can be better prepared. Is that okay? Do you guys have any questions so far? Okay, so without further ado, let's just get to an example. Let's see how this actually is. Remember, the first thing you will do is read, right? You will be reading something like this, and you will get how many seconds for that? You guys remember how many seconds do we have for reading?
45.
Great, thanks, Valentina, that's correct. So yes, I'm gonna give you guys 1 minute so that you can read. Please take a time to read this text and we'll discuss. Okay. So can you guys tell me what this was about? What is this about?
It's about psychologist behavior that that a person can have, for example, in a good experiences, in a good experience, the the person will be repeat the behavior that happened to get that experience. Otherwise, in the unpleasant consequence or experiences, the person is not going to repeat the behavior to avoid that consequence, and it's like a fact. Mhm.
Okay, Harry, great. Yeah, that's right. So yeah, exactly. It's about how we humans behave, right? So when we do something and it gets us a good result, we're very likely going to repeat it. And on the other hand, if we do something that gets us an unpleasant consequence, as Harry said, then we probably won't do it again, right? To avoid that from happening again. So that is what we call behavior modification, right? Now, this is obviously psychology because it's talking about how we behave, how we interact, behavior is always, psychology. So, okay, how we learn to, right? Now, what do you guys have to do when you read? During these 45 seconds that you have, the first thing that I want you guys to do, and this is actually happening before the 45 seconds because for some reason you get the title first. So the first thing that you guys are going to do is copy the title on your notes. So just like it is, don't change anything, don't try to paraphrase it or anything like that. I want you guys to write down behavior modification on your notes as soon as you get this text, or if you get a different one, you're going to get a different one, but you have to write down the title. Okay, as soon as you get the text, copy the title. Now, what else do you do aside from copying the title? You have to read and you have to look in this text for one sentence, only one sentence, or it could be that tells you or gives you that always going to be in one sentence. You don't need to summarize everything. The definition is not going to be found everywhere in text. There's always going to be this one specific sentence which contains this one specific phrase that tells you the definition. So can you guys tell me where the definition is here? Where's that definition? Where do they say or explain what behavior modification is? In which sentence?
In the first sentence.
Okay. Yes, it could be. I think it's a pretty good guess. Individuals often modify their behavior based on what they have learned about possible consequences of their actions. So yes, that's behavior modification, right? When they modify their behavior based on what they've learned about possible consequences of their actions. I would suggest most of the time you have these like important words, these common words that tell you where the definition is. So it could be in the first sentence or it could also be in the last. If you look at this, it says, well, so behavior modification can be observed in experience. It also occurs frequently in everyday settings when individuals change their behavior based on what they've learned about the consequences of that behavior, right? So both the first and the last are great. Okay, I won't tell you that the first one is wrong because it's the same, right? I will be lying if I told you that it's only the last one, because the first one is the same, right? Modify, change is the same. Based on the possible consequences of their actions is similar to the consequences of that behavior. So you guys can use the first or the last phrase, that's fine. But you just have to use one of them, by the way, okay? And you need to take notes. So just write down a couple of words that will help you remember this definition, because this isn't just about saying it, but the most important part, honestly, about reading is understanding the definition. Obviously, taking notes and being able to repeat it later is important too. But even more than that, you should be understanding very well what the topic is about. Behavior modification is when individuals change or modify their behavior based on what they have learned about the consequences of that behavior. Is that okay? Do you guys have any questions? If you're gonna write down a few words, then maybe write down change, behavior, consequences, right? Those are the keywords. And that's it. That's what you guys do when you're reading. Is that okay? Do you have any questions? As you can see here, this is the title, what you have to write down. This is the change, what you have to take notes on. And all of these are additional details that I'm not saying they're not important, but they are not as important as the definition. So your focus should be on finding that definition. So what is the next thing we do after reading? We listen to the lecture, right? We listen to this university lecture. Now, what is going to happen in this lecture? You're going to hear the professor talking about that same topic you just read about. So the professor will be continuing explaining behavior modification for you. Now, you will always have one or two real life examples of that concept. So in the lecture, you will hear examples, real life examples of how this concept is seen or is applied in our everyday lives or in an experiment, but basically an example of how it works. Okay, you're gonna see it in action. That's the most important part from the listening. There could be more things, you could have more details, you could have an intro, but that is not important. The important thing for you is to catch those or that example and to take notes and to understand how that example relates to the concept, right? You don't have to be lost. You need to be able to understand the relationship between the listening and the reading, okay? So when you get psychology topics, you'll get one example. When you get biology topics, you'll get two. And if you get business, it could be one or two. So let's listen to this lecture. Please get a piece of paper, take notes, and remember you're looking for examples of behavior modification in real life. Let's listen.
Now listen to part of a lecture on the topic in a psychology class. This happens all the time with kids in schools. Say there's a little boy or girl who's just starting school. Well, they're not really used to the rules about proper behavior for a classroom. So at the beginning they might, interrupt the teacher, walk around the classroom when they're supposed to be sitting down. Just misbehaving in general. Okay, but what happens? Well, the teacher gets angry with them when they act this way. They might get punished. They have to sit at their desks when everyone else is allowed to go outside and play. And they certainly don't like that. Soon, they'll learn that this kind of behavior gets them in trouble. They'll also learn that when they raise their hand to talk to the teacher and sit quietly and pay attention during class, they're rewarded. The teacher tells them she's proud of them and maybe puts little happy face stickers on their homework. Now that their behavior gets a good reaction from the teacher, the kids learn to always act this way in class and not behave the way they used to.
All right, so that was the lecture. So can you guys tell me what that lecture was about? What was the example or the example?
It was about kids and schools, how they, in the beginning, they don't understand quite well the rules, so they don't behave properly and they get punished. But when they behave like how the school, how it is supposed to, they get congratulated by the teacher, and that's how they modify their behavior.
Okay, great, Mateo. Honestly, I would say I love the way that you summarized that example. So if you're able to do that in your response, then you already got it. Well done. So what I liked about how Mateo summarized that example was that he focused on really the main ideas, right? If we look at the text here, you will notice that the professor really illustrated every single thing that was in the textbook or in the article, right? Because, for example, in the additional details, they said, when an individual learns from experience that a certain behavior results in pleasant consequences, so in this case, the individual will be the kid, right? So when the kid learns through experience, so they have already done something, they have behaved properly, right? So this behavior that when they behave well, and when they learn that that results in a pleasant consequence for them, so because they get congratulated, they get a reward, they get a prize, when they learn that, they then repeat the behavior, right? However, when they get an unpleasant consequence, so when they behave poorly, when they misbehave and they get a bad reaction from the teacher, then they are not going to repeat. That discourages further repetition of the behavior. That means that they won't do it again. So the professor illustrated these details. What else? The professor definitely illustrated the concept, right? The professor said when individuals, when kids change their behavior, so they change how they behave, they started behaving poorly at school, and then they changed their behavior and they behave well at the end. How? Based on what they've learned about the consequences of that behavior, right? About the reaction or the result of their behavior, the reaction that they got from the teacher. So the professor really illustrated every single thing that was said in the text. Now, however, the most important part here is always going to be that relates to the topic the most. So what relates to the topic the most, to behavior modification, is the way that individuals modify their behavior, right? That's the main point here. So you need to always focus more on how this example shows the concept, right? So how does this example of kids show the concept of behavior modification? Because these kids have modified their behavior based on the reactions that they got from the teacher. So I love the fact that Mateo focused on that specific guy, right? He wasn't focusing on the details, like what kids did, like whether they were walking around the classroom or whether they got a happy face sticker or not. But he was focusing on this specific idea, right? So that is what you guys have to do, basically. I mean, that's the most important part that you need to get from the lecture. And when you're speaking later, you will have to emphasize a lot on that connection. Especially the most important part, you need to emphasize this, right? How that example illustrated this concept that you got from the reading. And that's what Mateo did, right? At the end, they said, so this is how kids modify their behavior. And that is a perfect way to finish that idea. Okay, guys? Is that okay? Were you able to understand the lecture? Yes. So this is a transcript in case you want to take a look at it. Basically, maybe we can like underline the most important parts. So when they are starting school, when kids, the individuals here are going to be kids in school. When they are starting school, they don't know how to behave, so they misbehave. As a result, they get punished. That's the consequence. So they learn that they don't have to do that. They don't repeat that action. But when they behave properly and they do what they have to, then they get rewarded, right? And where is it? They get rewarded. And so they learn that gets them a good reaction, and they start always acting that way, right? They change, they modify their initial behavior. Is that okay then? Do you guys have any questions? All right. So now let's look at the question. David, could you please read the question?
Using the example for the lecture, explain what behavior modification is and how it works.
Thank you. So as you can see, they are not really saying, or they're not asking you to summarize, right? They don't say, summarize the reading, then summarize the lecture, which is what most students do, right? They just summarize it. They just summarize the reading, and they just summarize the lecture. But actually they're telling you, use that example to explain the concept. So you have to do exactly what we were doing before, right? What Mateo did too. So you need to tell me what behavior modification is, but not just using the definition you got. You need to use that example to explain to me what it is. So, the way that I like to think about this is try to explain it like you were explaining it to a child, to a like 12-year-old child. So you need to obviously always give examples when you're explaining things to children. And so when you want to explain a concept, you use an example, right? So you have to do that here. You need to explain the concept using that example. Okay, you need to emphasize the parts that you got from the reading in your example. Remember, you get 30 seconds to prepare, 60 to speak. What you do during those 30 seconds depends on what you need to do. As we said for task number 2, there are many options, there are many strategies. You need to practice using many of them and see what works better for you. And we can also see that during our speaking session, right? So it depends. If you're struggling in hurrying up in the introduction, really prepare your intro. If you cannot express well your ideas, maybe start practicing speaking. If you have too many notes, cross out a few things, review your notes. If you have problems connecting the ideas, then maybe you can try to circle the words from the example that are related to the topic. So maybe like drawing lines and drawing the connections you have in there. It depends. We're gonna see that later. But what you have to do during your 60 seconds that you have to speak is the same for everyone, right? That shouldn't be different. Everyone should be having like a similar response. Obviously not the same, but structure should be similar. So here's what we're gonna do. You have 60 seconds, you get 1 minute. So your clock starts at 60. During the first 10 to 15 seconds tops, you should be giving an introduction. Introductions are always necessary because they provide context, right? You cannot start talking about something without telling me first what it is or what everything was about. So in the introduction, what you guys are gonna do is mention the topic, aka the title. You're gonna mention what the title was that you have on your notes, and you're gonna include the definition that you got from the reading. As short, as concise, as clear, and as quick as you can. So for example, in this case, we would be saying, according to the passage, behavior modification occurs when people change their behavior based on what they've learned about the consequences of that behavior, right? Remember, you don't have to paraphrase it. I'm not asking you to paraphrase the definition because you don't need to. It's only gonna be 10 seconds out of your 60. So you have enough time to explain the example in your own words and to summarize and paraphrase that. But the definition, if you worry too much about paraphrasing it, you're just going to end up wasting time that you don't have. So it's better to copy and paste from the reading, whatever you have in definition, say it just like that. And the topic, you can never change it, right? That has to be the same. So that's it. That's your introduction. So you're going to spend there 10 to 15 seconds. So around your 50 to your like 45 seconds left, you should be starting with the lecture. In order to start with the lecture, you need to give a transition, of course. So you could use this one if you like it. You could say, in the lecture, the professor gives the example of, you give some context first, right? So who are we talking about? When is this example set? Where is it set? In this case, we're talking about kids in school, right? So we're gonna say, in the lecture, the professor gives the examples of kids at school. And then you have to start explaining the concept using the example, the way that Mateo did, right? So summarize the example as much as you can, forget about the details. You need to worry about showing you understand the relationship between the reading and the listening. So this is probably gonna take you about 5 to 7 seconds, right? So when you're like 40 to 37, 38 seconds left, then you need to start already explaining them, like the events, right? So what happened in this example, connecting it to the definition you have. Is that okay? That's basically it. That's what you guys need. Is that okay? Do you have any questions? No questions, really? Everything is clear? Yes, good. Okay. So now, of course, if you have extra time, try not to have too much extra time, but if you have some, go with a short conclusion, right? So you could use this one if you want. You can say, in summary, this is a great example of behavior modifications, right? You repeat again the topic. It's a good idea to say it at the end too, if you have extra time, okay? I'm gonna give you a sample response so you could see how you manage my time. And then we'll try to do other ones. Probably, since we did psychology, we can do a biology and a business one. More will be practicing. But let's see. I'm gonna do my best. According to the reading passage, behavior modification occurs when individuals modify or change their behavior based on experience. In a lecture, the professor gives the example of kids at school. He explains that when a kid is new to a school, they may not know the rules, so they start misbehaving in class. They may, for example, start walking around the classroom or talking when they're not supposed to. As a result, the professor or the teacher gets angry and has a bad reaction. They may punish the kid. However, they also learn that when they start behaving properly, when they do what they're supposed to, then they get a reward from the teacher. They get a good reaction from them. Therefore, the kid will learn how to behave in class. They will learn what gets them a positive reaction from the teacher. And at the end of the day, they will modify their behavior based on what they know are the consequences of that behavior, which are the teacher's reaction. Right? So that is it. As you can see, I didn't spend too much time explaining the example itself. You know, I didn't mention too many details. I did mention a few of them, like I think I said like walking around the classroom and talking when they're not supposed to. But then I realized that I didn't have that much time. So I was calculating my time and I noticed that I couldn't give examples for the second part about the good behavior. So I didn't give any more examples. I just focused on the most important ideas because I really wanted to have that closing idea at the end, right? Like try to connect it more and say, so this is how these kids are going to modify their behavior based on what they know the consequences of them are. I really wanted to include that, which is why I made some space. I didn't have a conclusion, but I try to close the response in some way, right? And one thing that I'm gonna give you as a tip especially when you're telling stories, try to use transition words, right? Like I could have used more. I could say first, when a kid is new to school, this is what they do. Afterwards, they behave well. As a result, they get a good reaction. Therefore, or then they learn. And I don't know. In summary, this is how these kids do this. So try to use those transitions. They're going to help you. And that's it, right? You maybe wasn't perfect, but I just wanted to show you the idea so that you get a better grasp of how to do it. Okay. Is that okay now? Do you guys have any questions? No questions? Everything okay? Great. In that case, let's do 2 more so that you know how biology and business could be too. Okay. Okay, guys, we're gonna do business. We're gonna go from easy to hard. So let's do business now. Remember, you will have 45 seconds to read this text. Please, you can start reading it now.
Now listen to part of a lecture on this topic in a marketing class.
Nowadays, something you notice more and more is television commercials that are made specifically for certain television programs. So, let's say a company wants to sell a telephone, a cell phone. Now, during TV shows that young people watch, shows with pop music or teen serials, they create a commercial that emphasizes how fun the phone is. The phone has bright colors, and they show kids having a good time with their friends. And, well, the company wants the kids watching TV at this time to want to buy this phone that's made especially for them. But the same company will make a different commercial to be shown during, say, a program about business or a business news show. Now, for this group of people, business people, the company will have to show how efficient their phone is, how it can handle all business easily, and maybe even save money. And here's the thing. It's basically the same phone. The company has just made 2 different commercials to appeal to different groups of people.
Yes. Using the professor's examples, explain the advertising technique of target marketing. You will now have 30 seconds to prepare your response. Okay. So this is gonna be our first try. It doesn't have to be perfect, but would somebody want to try? Then we can do it together too. After you guys do it, then maybe we can analyze it and see how we can answer this question. So anyone?
Can I try, teacher?
Yeah, sure, Valentina, great. So please, you may start speaking now.
Okay, according to the passage, target marketing is defined as the strategy to reach new clients. In the lecture, the professor gives the example of cell phones, like when they want to sell cell phones to a younger audience, they have to show how fun the cell phone is, but otherwise, when they want to sell the cell phone to businessmen, they have to show how efficient it is and how the cell phone handle business. And in summary, this is a glaring example of what target marketing is.
Okay, great. That was great, Valentina, well done. It was a great response, well done. So nice. I like the fact that you had your intro. It was fast. It was exactly 10 seconds, actually. We talked about because it was one example that divided into two parts, right? So you went with the first part in the beginning. You summarized it perfectly. So you focused on what was important. If a company wants to sell cell phones to a younger audience, they have to show how fun the phone is. And you use a transition, nice transition there. Otherwise, when they want to sell it to businessmen, they need to show how efficient the phone is. Maybe include the detail that it's a commercial to keep it a little more accurate, but it was great. I don't have any comments in terms of the example. Maybe what I could say is, as for the definition, you said target marketing is a strategy to reach new clients, right? A way to reach new clients. So you said it in your own words. I like the fact that you have vocabulary to discuss business. But I'm not sure if that is exactly the definition of target marketing, right? Or it is a strategy to reach more customers, but how? Like, how does this strategy work? Maybe it would be good to include it, right? So that is why I say, try not to paraphrase, try not to say it in your own words in the introduction. It's only 10 seconds, so maybe you can use, what do you have here, right? Could say the target marketing is a strategy of advertising to smaller specific audiences, right? So use this definition to be more accurate. And then, just summarize the example exactly the way you did. It was perfect. Okay.
Thanks, teacher.
Okay, guys, do you have any questions so far? Nice. Then now let's do a biology one. Okay, so it is the same idea. You will get 45 seconds to read the text. Please, you can start reading now.
Now listen to part of a lecture from a biology class.
There's a large tropical insect called the peanut bug. Yes, like the peanuts that you eat. And the peanut bug's front wings are colored so that they blend in with their surroundings. But its back wings, which are usually closed and hidden, have these bright, colorful spots on them. And when the peanut bug's attacked, it suddenly opens its back wings, and out pop these big, bright colors. And that surprises the predator and gives the peanut bug a chance to get away. And then you have a butterfly called the morpho butterfly. And parts of the morpho butterfly's wings are very shiny. They reflect a lot of sunlight. When this butterfly is resting, this shiny part of its wings is hidden. Now, morpho butterflies are often attacked by birds. So when a bird approaches, the morpho flies away. And when the morpho flaps its wings, all the bird can see are flashes of light reflected from the morpho's wings. Those flashes of light make it very difficult for the bird to follow the morpho, and the morpho is usually able to get away.
Okay. Now, using the examples from the peanut bug and the morpho butterfly, explain the concept of revealing coloration. We'll now have 30 seconds to prepare your responses. Okay. So, does anyone want to try? Nobody? Maybe we can review a little bit what this was about. So if we go back to the text, what is revealing coloration?
It's a defensive strategy that animals use to protect themselves from predators.
Great. Yeah, that's a great definition. So it's a defensive strategy that animals use to protect themselves from predators. Nice. Now, one thing I like about this, I mean, when you get biology topics, not always, but like 80% of the time, in the question, you already have the examples, right? You have the names of the examples. They say using the examples from the peanut bug and the morpho butterfly. So we know we have two examples. One is the peanut bug and the other is the morpho butterfly. And we know that the two of them use revealing coloration, right? Use this defensive mechanism. So can you guys tell me how this animal, the peanut bug, uses it? How does the peanut bug use revealing coloration?
To get a chance to get away from the predator.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe a little bit more details. How do they do this?
They have a color light spots in their wings, and when they open their wings, they reflect.
Yeah, exactly. So yes, the peanut bug has these bright spots on their wings. So when they open them to fly away, they basically scare the predator right? And then they're able to go away. So that's how they avoid being caught. What about the morpho butterfly? How does the morpho butterfly uses revealing coloration? How do they use it? I think it's pretty much the same idea, right? I think it's almost the same as the peanut bag. So I think they have not bright spot, not like color spots there, but they have something in their wings, under their wings, I think, so that when they are laying down, when they are resting, then you can see this. But when they start flying, then I think their wings reflect the sunlight, right? And this is like too much light for the predators, so they get scared and the morpho butterfly can escape. Like the same idea. They are using this defense mechanism to escape predators. So that's it. That's everything you guys need to do, right? You already know the concept, so it gets easier. You know that the peanut bag uses revealing coloration to escape predators, and the morpho butterfly does the same. Just maybe give some details about how this happens, and you have your response already. Use some transitions because you have two examples. Tell me, first, the professor explains that the peanut bag has this and this and that. Furthermore, the morpho butterfly is another example, and explain it, right? Could anyone do that? What about you, Mateo? Want you to try?
Okay.
Okay. So please, you may go ahead now.
According to the passage, revealing coloration defines as a defensive strategy involving the use of coloration to get away from predators. In the lecture, the professor gives the example of peanut bags, which has two types of wings, the front wings and the back wings. The back wings got some spotlights, which when they out-pop them, give bright colors, which helps them escape from its predators. He also gives the example of morpho butterflies, which has parts of its wings, those some bright colors they use when birds attack.
Okay, great. Wasn't bad at all. You know, when this happens and the two examples are similar, remember you don't necessarily have to mention everything, right? You just have to try to explain the concept. So if you already explained in detail, because you did, right? You explained how the peanut bag mechanism work in a detailed way, and it was great. So you can try to summarize a little bit more the morpho butterfly one and say, like, for example, you could say, on the other hand, or furthermore, the morpho butterfly does the same. Their strategy is similar to the one from the peanut bag. They use revealing coloration as a way to escape predators, right? I didn't really give any details, but I'm saying that in case you don't have a lot of time, right? So you didn't have that much time to this for the second one. So if that happens, it's okay if you don't mention it too many details. Okay, remember, what you guys have to keep in mind for all of these speaking questions is that the main thing is to show that you can speak well, right? So the content is important. I'm not saying it's not, but it's not the main thing at the end of it. So always prioritize finishing your response in time and showing that you can have good sense. But really, Mateo, that was honestly a response. I personally like the way that you explained the peanut bag. It was like precise with enough and relevant details. Your definition was great too. One tiny detail for the introduction, when you use the word define, remember you mentioned the topic, revealing coloration is defined as, right? Don't say defines as, because that has a different meaning. Is defined as in the present voice. That'd be the only thing. Congrats. What do you guys think? Do you have any questions then before we go? Don't have any questions? Is everything clear? Everything okay? Ready for tomorrow to practice?
So, teacher, I have a question. So it's enough to talk about one example from the text, right?
If they are very similar, like in this case, I'm not
Mm.
saying that it's no, but if in case you don't have that much time to explain the second one, it's okay. It's not a big problem. Won't affect your score that much. So in case they are really similar to each other, you can find ways to skip some details if you have already explained the first one. And that also helps like avoiding redundancy, right? So if you have enough time to explain detail the second one, then go ahead. But if not, it's okay if you refer to the first one as an explanation for the second one.
Okay. Thank you, teacher.
Sure. Any other question? Okay, guys. Please then don't forget today's survey. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. We'll be practicing this.
Thank you, teacher. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, teacher.
Bye.
Thank you, teacher.